The U.S. military says forces are on alert to enforce Iran naval blockade. Egypt condemns the Iranian attacks on Gulf countries and warns of a wider regional conflict. And Israel says military controls around 70% of Gaza. It's 7 p.m. Cairo local time. You're watching Q News. I'm Henny Saif, and these are the news today. The U.S. military says its forces are on alert to enforce the naval blockade on Iran after diverting 2 commercial ships. The U.S. Central Command says American forces remain on high alert to ensure full enforcement of the naval blockade imposed on Iran. CENTCOM said 2 commercial vessels were diverted after attempting to breach the blockade. The announcement came hours after the command said it had concluded a 90-minute round of strikes against Iranian targets. The latest developments underscore growing tensions as Washington steps up military pressure on Tehran. The U.S. Central Command says it has completed a new wave of strikes against Iran, targeting military capabilities used to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM said the latest operation was aimed at weakening Iran's ability to attack commercial vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. military said the strikes successfully hit Iranian coastal defense systems and cruise missile sites. The announcement comes as Washington continues military operations against Iran and steps up efforts to protect shipping through the strategic waterway. Iran's military says 7 service members were killed in U.S. strikes on the country's southeast, warning the attack will face a decisive response. The Iranian army said 7 military personnel were killed in U.S. strikes on the Bampur base in southeastern Iran. It said 13 U.S. missiles targeted guard posts and accommodation facilities at the base. The army warned that the attack on military living quarters would not go unanswered and vowed what it called a decisive response. Meanwhile, an Iranian government spokesperson said more than 30 people had been killed in U.S. attacks across the country in recent days. Iranian media say a U.S. strike targeted a maritime observation tower in Chabahar with no casualties or damage reported. Iran's Mehr's news agency said the strike hit a maritime monitoring tower in southeastern city of Chabahar. The facility was reportedly used to support fishermen, rescue operations, and help secure commercial shipping. Tasnim news agency said the attack caused no casualties or material damage. The report comes amid continued U.S. strikes on Iranian military and coastal sites.
وأكد أن مصر تدين بقوة كافة أشكال الاعتداء على دول الخليج والأردن والعراق الشقيق. وأود أن أؤكد أن الأمن القومي للدول العربية جزء لا يتجزأ من الأمن القومي المصري.
Tonight, the Middle East is once again on the brink as military confrontation between the United States and Iran intensifies despite growing international calls for restraint. With fresh U.S. strikes, a renewed naval blockade, Iranian threats to close the Strait of Hormuz, and fears over global energy supplies, the crisis is entering a dangerous new phase, raising fresh questions over whether diplomacy can still prevent a wider regional conflict.
A sharp and dangerous escalation is taking place between Washington and Tehran as the fragile path toward diplomacy gives way to open confrontation across the Gulf. The United States has reimposed a full naval blockade on Iranian ports and carried out a night full of strikes for the fourth day in a row, targeting military infrastructure near the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. officials say the operations aim to curb Iran's ability to threaten global shipping lanes. U.S. President Donald Trump warned that Iranian power plants and key infrastructure could be next unless Tehran returns to negotiations. In response, Iran's Revolutionary Guard has issued its starkest warning yet, threatening to halt all Middle East energy exports and keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, declaring it will not back down under pressure. The escalation follows a rapid collapse of last month's U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding, which had briefly paused hostilities and opened the door to talks. On the ground, the two sides have exchanged strikes across the region. Iran launched missiles and drones targeting U.S. positions in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan, while Washington expanded sanctions and intensified military pressure. Oil prices are rising and international concern is mounting, while the United Nations urging maximum restraint amid fears of a wider regional conflict. Looking ahead, despite the escalation, U.S. officials signal talks could still resume, while Iran insists any negotiations must come without coercion. For now, the region stands at a critical crossroads between renewed diplomacy or a deeper, more dangerous conflict.
Bahrain's defense forces says its air defense systems intercepted a number of Iranian attacks targeting the kingdom earlier today. Bahrain's defense force accused Iran of continuing what it described as a hostile campaign targeting civilians in the kingdom. It said air defense systems intercepted several Iranian attacks this morning. The force added that its weapons and units remain at the highest level of readiness to defend Bahrain against any further threats. It also said attacks on civilians and private property using missiles and drones represent a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. Kuwait says its air defenses intercepted a wave of Iranian missiles and drones overnight, while 4 naval personnel were injured in an attack on a Kuwaiti vessel. The Kuwaiti military said its air defenses responded to Iranian drone attacks during the night. It reported intercepting 1 ballistic missile, 5 cruise missiles, and 33 drones over the past several hours. The army added that a Kuwaiti naval vessel was targeted, leaving 4 service members injured. Officials said their conditions are stable. Separately, Kuwait's fire force said it brought a blaze under control at one location following the Iranian attacks, with no injuries reported. The United Arab Emirates has condemned renewed Iranian attacks on Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan, calling them a violation of the sovereignty of fellow Arab states. The UAE condemned the latest Iranian attacks targeting Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan, and in a statement, the Foreign Ministry described the attacks as a flagrant violation of the sovereignty of the 3 countries and a threat to their security and stability. The UAE reaffirmed its full solidarity with Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. It also voiced support for all measures aimed at safeguarding the security and stability of the 3 countries. Egypt has condemned Iranian attacks on Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan, warning they threaten regional security and risk widening the conflict. Egypt condemned the Iranian attacks targeting Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan and reaffirmed its full solidarity with the three countries. The Foreign Ministry said the attacks violate their sovereignty and territorial integrity. It warned that the escalation is deepening regional tensions and threatening security and stability across the whole region. Egypt also reiterated its firm rejection of any action that could widen the conflict or further destabilize the region. Cairo called for respect for international law, state sovereignty and the preservation of regional peace and security. For more on this, we now move to Rehem Morsi in our newsroom. Rehem.
Thank you so much, Henny. And for further analysis, we're joined from Washington, D.C. by the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the State for Near Eastern Affairs and Senior Director at the Middle East Media Research Institute, Ethan Goldrich. Thank you for joining us here this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off by asking you about the United States. It has carried out another wave of strikes against Iranian targets. How do you assess Washington's current strategy, and is this still about deterrence, or has it shifted towards a sustained military pressure, or is it possibly a negotiating tactic?
Well, I think first we should take a look at how we got into the situation, which was a memorandum of understanding, which was a very weak, very poorly worded document that fell apart because it was not well structured. That said, from an Iranian perspective, there was a lot that they could have gotten out of it, and they chose to start using military force again. So we're back in a shooting war because Iran chose to start attacking vessels again. The United States responded militarily because we were back in a military situation. What concerns me, and coming into your question, is what is our U.S. strategy now to resolve the larger question of transiting the Strait of Hormuz? What I'm seeing now is military action, which isn't necessarily a strategy. It's a reaction to the situation. The strategy is what is it that will take us to a solution to the situation.
One of the issues here is the number of statements that are coming out of the White House that are contradictory, including President Trump saying that Iran still wants a deal even as the military options and the operations continue. Given the contradictions within the White House itself, do you think that diplomacy can survive these conditions, and is the administration still willing to look at a diplomatic solution here?
Yeah, it seems clear to me that the administration's preference was a negotiated diplomatic solution. And that was probably one of the reasons they moved so hastily into the MOU, which was flawed. So I think what they need is good diplomacy, good solid diplomacy to come out of this. That's their preference. But again, the Iranians, they get a vote. And if they're not participating as good faith actors, we have to figure out how to deal with them and to get them back into a diplomatic negotiation if that's what the administration preferred.
All right, well, since you discussed Iran there, now Iran has threatened to retaliate and continues to warn about the Strait of Hormuz. How concerned should the international community be about the risk of a broader spillover of this conflict?
I think the international community should be concerned. This has been a very volatile situation going all the way back to February 28th. And I think as everyone, including our administration, has learned, there is no easy exit from this crisis. And if we're not careful and we're not strategizing and coming up with well-worded agreements or using our military effectively and strategically, the danger of the situation gets worse. It doesn't get better. So this is an international crisis, and the international community should be concerned and working toward a resolution.
Well, neighbouring countries are obviously affected by what's happening. Now, several Arab countries, including Egypt, the UAE, Bahrain, Jordan and Kuwait, have condemned these Iranian attacks on neighbouring countries to Iran. How significant is the level of regional coordination with Washington, and what's to be done here?
Well, I think it's really important to be coordinating with the countries in the region. I think one of the better things that happened over the past few weeks was that Secretary Rubio went out to talk with some of the Gulf countries. I think we should continue to be coordinating intensely with the Gulf countries. I think it's terrible that the Iranians continue to attack the Gulf countries in the middle of everything else. And again, when we're unified and we all work together, we're much, much stronger. So I would advocate we continue to coordinate with regional countries and as well as with our allies in Europe.
Okay, well, what's also interesting here is the NATO summit that took place in Ankara. Now, the leaders there reaffirmed that Iran must never obtain a nuclear weapon. Are we seeing NATO becoming more engaged in the Middle East security? Because the last few months, most NATO members were not interested in joining in.
I think the NATO countries, some of the NATO countries were concerned about how the war started. And sometimes they're skeptical, and I think they're still asking questions about what our plans and intentions are. And I think we need to do a better job of coordinating with our allies and getting our allies on board. But our allies also need to understand that this is a volatile situation. If there are ways that they can help, including eventually participating in whatever mechanisms should exist to keep the strait open in the long term, that's important for all of our interests.
Well, thank you so much for your take there. From Washington, D.C., that was Ethan Goldrich, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs and Senior Director at the Middle East Media Research Institute. Thank you for joining this evening. And now we cross over to Henny Safe back in the studio.
Thank you, Rahim. As regional attention remains fixed on the escalating confrontation between Washington and Tehran, the war in Gaza continues to exact a devastating toll, with fresh casualties reported, renewed diplomatic efforts and mounting international concern over the worsening humanitarian situation. Israeli media says the military has established operational control over around 70% of the Gaza Strip. It cites sources and reported that military representatives informed the Israeli army leadership and members of the security cabinet that operational control now extends across. Sources said the move came after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued formal instructions to raise the level of control to 70%. The development comes amid continued Israeli military operations and growing concern over the humanitarian situation in Gaza. At least 5 Palestinians have been killed in separate Israeli attacks across the Gaza Strip. 4 Palestinians were killed when an Israeli strike targeted a house in Deir el-Balah in central Gaza. Our correspondent also reported that a young man died from injuries sustained in an earlier Israeli attack on Gaza City's Sheikh Radwan neighborhood. Several others were injured after Israeli helicopters struck a shelter center west of the city. In southern Gaza, Israeli military vehicles opened machine gun fire towards the Al-Mawasi area of Rafah. The road to the 2026 FIFA World Cup final is almost complete. Spain have already booked their place after a commanding victory over France, while all eyes now turn to the second semi-final, where England and defending champions Argentina renew one of football's greatest rivalries with a place in Sunday's final on the line. Rehan Morsi has the latest.
Thank you so much, Henny. Spain have reached the 2026 World Cup final after beating France 2-0 in their semi-final clash in Dallas. Spain secured their place in the World Cup final with a 2-0 victory over France at the stadium, with Mikhail Oyarzabal opening the scoring from the penalty spot in the 22nd minute. Pedro Porro doubled Spain's lead in the 57th minute to seal the victory for the La Roja. Spain will now face the winners of the semi-final between England and Argentina. It is Spain's second appearance in the World Cup final, following their title-winning campaign in South Africa in 2010. France's captain Kylian Mbappé has expressed disappointment after Les Bleus were knocked out of the World Cup by Spain. Mbappé said France failed to deliver the technical and tactical performance required in a 2-0 semi-final defeat. The French captain acknowledged that Spain imposed their style and controlled the tempo of the match. Mbappé added that the team must quickly move beyond the disappointment and focus on the challenges ahead, adding that the football waits for no one, with players now turning their attention to the upcoming commitments with their clubs and the national team. England and Argentina are set for a blockbuster World Cup semi-final with a place against Spain in Sunday's final at stake. The second World Cup semi-final brings together England and defending champions Argentina in a major European South American showdown. England reached the last four after beating Norway 2-1 in the quarterfinals. Argentina, meanwhile, secured their semi-final place with a 3-1 victory over Switzerland. The winner will face Spain in Sunday's final in New Jersey, while the losing side will meet France in the third-place playoff. That's it for the sports, and now we head back to Henny Safe in the studio.
Thank you, Raham, and by this we come to the end of our news bulletin for this hour. But before we go, here's a quick recap of the top stories making headlines this hour. The U.S. military says forces are on alert to enforce an Iranian naval blockade. Egypt condemns Iranian attacks on Gulf countries and warns of a wider regional conflict. And Israel says its military controls around 70% of Gaza. These are all the news we have for now, but as the day's developments continue to unfold, our coverage continues as well. I'm Henny Saif. Stay with us here on Q News.